The maid froze outside the bedroom door, her hand still on the handle, because the voice on the other side wasn't supposed to be there. If she walked in now, she could lose the only job keeping her daughter fed. But if she stayed silent, someone else's life could fall apart. The fiancé was laughing on the phone, using a name that didn't belong to anyone the billionaire had ever mentioned. 20 feet away, the man who trusted her completely was signing papers that would make this woman his wife in 6 weeks. What the maid heard in the next 10 seconds would change everything, but she had no idea yet how far this woman would go to keep her quiet. Welcome back to another story about the secrets people hide behind closed doors, and the quiet ones who end up carrying the truth. If you love stories about loyalty, betrayal, and the moment everything finally comes to light, you're in the right place. Where are you watching from tonight? Drop it in the comments. And if you haven't yet, subscribe because there's a lot more where this came from. Nadia Coles had learned a long time ago that rich people didn't see her. She could walk through a room carrying a tray of coffee, and a man in a $3,000 suit would talk about his divorce like she was part of the furniture. It wasn't cruelty exactly. It was just how the world worked when you wore a uniform. She'd stopped minding it 2 years ago, right around the time she started working for Daniel Ashford. Daniel was different, and that was the part that made this job bearable. He was 36, ran a private equity firm that owned pieces of half the buildings in the financial district, and he still said good morning to her like he meant it. He remembered her daughter's name. He asked how Maya was doing in daycare, whether she'd finally stopped being scared of the dark. Small things. But in a penthouse on the 40th floor of a building he owned outright, small things mattered. Nadia needed this job more than she let anyone know. Her ex-husband had stopped sending support checks 18 months ago, and the daycare bill alone ate up nearly a third of what she made. The Ashford position paid almost double what she'd earned at her last house, and Daniel had never once made her feel small for taking it. She showed up at 7, left at 4, and kept her head down. That was the deal, and it had worked fine, until Vanessa moved in. Vanessa Klein was the kind of beautiful that made people stop talking mid-sentence. Blonde, poised, always dressed like she was one photograph away from a magazine cover. She'd met Daniel at a charity gala 14 months ago, and within a year she had a ring on her finger and a wedding planner on retainer. On paper she came from money, a family in Connecticut, a father who'd sold some kind of logistics company. Daniel had never had a reason to look any closer than that. From the very first week, Vanessa was polite to Nadia in the way people are polite to a waiter they never planned to tip. She'd hand over a coat without looking at her. She'd correct the way Nadia folded towels, then say, "It's fine, don't worry about it," in a tone that made clear it was not fine. Small cuts. Nadia had seen women like this before. You learned to let it slide off you, because the alternative was losing sleep over someone who'd never lose a minute of sleep over you. But there was one moment in the second week that Nadia couldn't quite shake. She'd been dusting the bookshelf in Daniel's study when she found a photograph tucked behind a row of hard covers. Vanessa, younger, standing in front of a modest brick house with 2 people who did not look like they belonged in a Connecticut country club. Before Nadia could think twice about it, Vanessa had appeared in the doorway, snatched the photo from her hand without a word, and told her the study was off limits from now on. Her voice had been calm. Her eyes had not been. Nadia never mentioned it to Daniel. It wasn't her business, and she needed the job too badly to make waves over something that was probably nothing. Rich people had complicated families. That wasn't a crime. 3 weeks later, Daniel proposed. Nadia watched it happen from the kitchen doorway, holding a tray she'd forgotten she was carrying, as he got down on one knee on the terrace with the entire city glittering behind him. Vanessa cried real tears. Nadia would give her that, and said yes before he even finished the question. Daniel looked happier than Nadia had ever seen him. She was happy for him, genuinely. Whatever her instincts said about Vanessa, it wasn't her place to poison a man's engagement over a locked study and a bad feeling. The wedding was set for 6 weeks out. The apartment filled up with swatches and seating charts and a florist who came by twice a week just to argue about peonies. Vanessa threw herself into the planning with an intensity that struck Nadia as less like joy and more like control. Every detail had to be exact. Every vendor who disappointed her got replaced within the day. Daniel, buried in a merger at work, mostly stayed out of it and let her run the show. It was on a Tuesday afternoon, 4 weeks before the wedding, that Nadia first heard the name. She'd gone up to the primary bedroom to collect the dry cleaning bags, expecting the room to be empty. Daniel was at the office, and Vanessa was supposed to be at a fitting. But the bedroom door was cracked, and Vanessa's voice drifted out, low and urgent in a way Nadia had never heard her use. "I told you not to call this number," Vanessa was saying. "If he sees this on the bill, I'm done, do you understand me?" We agreed. 6 more weeks, and then none of this matters anymore. Nadia stood frozen in the hallway, one hand still on the laundry cart. She wasn't trying to eavesdrop. She told herself that later, over and over. She'd simply come up the stairs at the wrong moment. "Marcus, I mean it," Vanessa continued, her voice dropping even further. "You get your money the day the ring is real. Not before. If you ruin this for me now, after everything I've done to get here, I swear to God." A door somewhere below closed. Vanessa's voice cut off mid-sentence, and a second later she appeared in the bedroom doorway, phone pressed flat against her chest, staring at Nadia with an expression that lasted only a heartbeat before smoothing into something pleasant and unreadable. "Nadia," she said, "I didn't hear you come up." "I'm sorry, ma'am. I came for the dry cleaning." Nadia kept her eyes down, her voice even, her hand steady on the cart handle even though her heart was hammering. Vanessa studied her for a long moment. "Take it and go," she said finally, and shut the door before Nadia had even reached the hall closet. Nadia carried the dry cleaning downstairs with her mind racing. A name, Marcus. Money tied to a wedding date. A threat wrapped in something that sounded almost like fear. It didn't add up to anything she could take to Daniel, not yet. She had no proof of what she'd heard, only fragments, and she knew exactly how it would look. The maid, spreading rumors about the woman about to become her boss's wife. She could lose everything over half a sentence. But she couldn't stop turning it over in her mind either. Whatever this was, it wasn't nothing. And for the first time since she'd started working in that penthouse, Nadia understood that she knew something about Vanessa Klein that Daniel Ashford did not. That night, walking home to pick up Maya from her sister's apartment, Nadia made a decision. She would watch. She wouldn't say anything yet, wouldn't accuse anyone of anything she couldn't prove. But she would pay attention. Because whatever Vanessa was hiding, it felt like the kind of secret that didn't stay buried forever. And Nadia had a very bad feeling about what would happen to her if she was the one standing nearby when it finally came out. The trouble started 3 days later. And it started exactly the way Nadia should have expected it to. She was clearing breakfast dishes when Vanessa swept into the kitchen, already dressed for a lunch meeting with a wedding planner, checking her reflection in the dark screen of her phone. "Nadia, have you seen my bracelet? The sapphire one, from my mother." Her tone was light, almost careless, but her eyes weren't. "No, ma'am. I haven't touched your jewelry box. I'm sure it'll turn up." Vanessa smiled, but it didn't reach anywhere near her eyes, and she left the kitchen without another word. It turned up that afternoon, in the pocket of Nadia's uniform apron, hanging in the staff closet where Nadia had left it that morning. Nadia hadn't put it there. She knew she hadn't, the same way she knew her own name, But knowing something and proving it were two very different things when you were the help and the accuser was about to become the lady of the house. Daniel came home to find Vanessa in tears at the kitchen island, the bracelet sitting between them like evidence at a trial. "I don't want to believe it," Vanessa was saying, dabbing at eyes that Nadia noticed were suspiciously dry around the edges. "I really don't, Daniel. But it was in her apron. I checked myself." "I didn't take it," Nadia said, and her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I don't know how it got there." Daniel looked between the two women, and for the first time since Nadia had started working for him, she watched him hesitate before choosing whose side to stand on. It wasn't a long hesitation, maybe 3 seconds, but it was long enough for Nadia to feel the floor shift under her. "Nadia's worked for me for 2 years, he finally said carefully, to Vanessa rather than to Nadia. "I've never once had a reason to question her honesty." "I'm not saying she's a bad person," Vanessa said quickly, softening her voice into something almost apologetic. "Maybe she just forgot it was in there. People make mistakes. I just need it to not happen again, especially with the wedding coming up. There's going to be so much jewelry in this apartment." It was a masterclass, Nadia realized later, replaying it in her head on the walk home. Vanessa hadn't demanded she be fired. She hadn't screamed or thrown accusations. She'd planted a small, reasonable-sounding doubt and let it sit there, quiet and patient, exactly where it would do the most damage over time. Daniel didn't fire her. He didn't even formally reprimand her. But something in the apartment had shifted, and Nadia could feel it every time she caught him glancing at her a half-second longer than he used to. What Nadia didn't know, what she had no way of knowing yet, was that the bracelet incident hadn't been random cruelty. Vanessa had needed a reason to justify going through Nadia's things without raising suspicion, and planting the bracelet had given her exactly that. 2 days after the theft, while Nadia was out picking up dry cleaning, Vanessa searched the staff closet thoroughly, checking Nadia's bag, her spare uniform, even the lining of her coat. She was looking for something specific. She didn't find it because there was nothing to find. Nadia hadn't told a single soul what she'd overheard. But the search told Nadia something important once she noticed her belongings had been disturbed. Vanessa was scared enough of what Nadia might know to go looking for proof that she knew it. The next clue came from an unexpected place. Daniel's assistant, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Priya who managed his calendar and occasionally handled personal errands, mentioned in passing to Nadia one afternoon that she'd had trouble verifying Vanessa's employment history for the prenup paperwork. "It's the strangest thing," Priya said, half to herself, sorting through a folder while she waited for Daniel to finish a call. "Her last employer's phone number just goes to a disconnected line. Her college transcript request came back with no record under that name. Probably just some clerical mess-up on their end. Big schools lose records all the time." Nadia said nothing, but she filed it away carefully, the same way she'd filed away the photograph behind the bookshelf and the whispered phone call and the name Marcus. The following week, Daniel began working later, distracted by the merger at his firm, and it fell to Nadia to handle more of the wedding-related errands around the apartment, signing for deliveries, organizing vendor paperwork, occasionally fielding phone calls when Vanessa was out. It was during one of these calls that Nadia's suspicion sharpened into something closer to certainty. The caller ID read unknown, but the man on the other end, when Nadia answered thinking it might be the caterer, asked immediately for Vanessa in a voice she recognized instantly, even though she'd only heard it muffled through a bedroom door. "She's not available right now," Nadia said carefully. "Can I take a message?" There was a pause. "Tell her Marcus called. Tell her the deadline hasn't changed." He hung up before Nadia could respond. Nadia stood in the hallway holding the phone long after the line went dead, her mind working through everything she now knew. A man named Marcus. A deadline tied to money. A woman with no verifiable college transcript and a disconnected former employer. A photograph of a modest brick house that didn't match the story Vanessa told at dinner parties about her Connecticut upbringing. She still had no proof of anything, not really. Nothing that would survive being said out loud to Daniel without sounding like the jealous fabrication of a maid who'd just been accused of theft. But the pieces were forming a shape now, even if Nadia couldn't yet see the whole picture. Vanessa Klein was hiding something about who she really was, and whatever it was tied to money, and it was tied to the wedding date 6 weeks away. Nadia thought about walking away from the whole situation more than once that week. She could quit, find another position, let Daniel Ashford figure out his own fiancé's secrets without her getting caught in the crossfire. She had Maya to think about, and Maya needed a mother with a job and a clean reputation, not one tangled up in a rich man's engagement drama. But every time she got close to deciding that, she thought about the way Daniel had hesitated in the kitchen, that 3-second pause before he'd defended her. He was a good man, she believed that. He deserved better than to walk into a marriage built on whatever Vanessa was hiding behind that locked study door. Nadia didn't know yet what she was going to do about it. But she knew she couldn't just look away anymore. That night, she wrote the name Marcus on a scrap of paper and tucked it into the bottom of her bag, underneath a photo of Maya. She didn't know why she felt like she needed to keep it. She just knew that somehow this wasn't over, and the next time something happened she wanted to be ready. The next development came from a place Nadia never expected, the lobby of the building, on an ordinary Thursday morning, 10 days before the wedding. Nadia had come down early to sign for a delivery of table linens when she noticed a woman standing near the concierge desk, arguing quietly with the doorman about being let upstairs. The woman was maybe 50, dressed plainly, clutching a purse against her stomach like she wasn't entirely sure she belonged in a building with marble floors and a chandelier the size of a small car. Something about her voice made Nadia slow down. "I just need 5 minutes with her," the woman was saying. "Tell her it's her mother. She'll know what that means." The doorman, polite but firm, explained that residents controlled their own visitor lists and Ms. Klein hadn't authorized anyone by that description. The woman's shoulders sagged, and for a moment Nadia thought she might cry right there in the lobby. Nadia didn't plan what happened next. She simply found herself walking over, introducing herself as staff for the Ashford residence, and asking gently if she could help. The woman's name was Carol Renner. Not Klein. Renner. And the daughter she was trying to reach was named Vanessa, but the last time Carol had seen her 5 years ago, her daughter had gone by the name she was born with. Vanessa Renner, from a town outside Scranton, Pennsylvania, not Connecticut, not old money, not any of it. "She stopped answering my calls after she moved to the city," Carol said, her voice cracking. "Then I saw the engagement announcement in a magazine at the grocery store. My own daughter. And I found out she was engaged from a magazine. I just wanted to see her. I don't want anything from her, I swear to God, I just want to see my baby before." She stopped herself, pressing a hand to her mouth. Nadia's chest tightened. "Before what, ma'am?" Carol hesitated, then seemed to decide it didn't matter anymore who knew. "Before I'm gone. I'm sick. I don't have a lot of time left. And she won't even return a text message." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I don't understand what happened to her. She wasn't always like this. She used to be sweet." Nadia didn't know what to say. She gave Carol her own cell number, told her she'd try to find a way to get a message to Vanessa, and watched the older woman leave through the revolving doors with the particular slowness of someone who'd been disappointed too many times to hope for much. Nadia carried the encounter with her all day, turning it over from every angle. A mother dying, cut off completely. A fake background story sold to a wealthy fiancé. A man named Marcus demanding money before a wedding date. It was starting to look less like a woman keeping an embarrassing secret and more like something far more calculated, though Nadia still couldn't see the whole shape of it. That evening everything accelerated. Daniel came home unusually early, tie loosened, expression tight in a way Nadia had learned to recognize as trouble at the office. But it wasn't the merger on his mind. He found Nadia in the kitchen and asked, quietly, almost like he was embarrassed to be asking at all, whether she'd noticed anything strange about Vanessa lately. Nadia's pulse spiked. She chose her words with extreme care. Strange how, sir? She's been secretive about her phone. Won't leave it out anymore, takes calls in other rooms. And our prenup lawyer flagged that her background check keeps hitting dead ends. He says it happens sometimes with people who've changed their name, divorce, that kind of thing. But something about the way she reacted when I brought it up. He rubbed the back of his neck. She got angry. Really angry, in a way I hadn't seen from her before. Told me I didn't trust her, that I was ruining everything 10 days before the wedding, and then she just shut down. Wouldn't talk to me for the rest of the night. Nadia stood very still, weighing the moment in front of her. She could stay silent, protect herself, let Daniel find his own way to whatever truth was waiting for him. Or she could tell him what she knew. The overheard phone call, the man named Marcus, the mother in the lobby with a different last name, and a story that didn't match anything Vanessa had ever claimed. If she was wrong, or if Daniel didn't believe her, she would lose her job and possibly her reputation in this entire industry. Rich clients talk to each other. A maid accused of meddling in her employer's engagement wouldn't get hired again easily. But she thought of Carol Renner's face in the lobby, and she thought of Daniel signing a marriage license in 10 days to a woman who might be building her entire future on a lie. Sir, Nadia said slowly, there's something I probably should have told you a while ago. I wasn't sure it was my place. I'm still not sure. But I think you need to hear it. Daniel's expression sharpened, all the exhaustion draining out of it and something colder taking its place. Tell me. Nadia told him everything. The phone call she'd overheard weeks ago, the name Marcus, the threat about the ring becoming real, the photograph behind the bookshelf, and finally, the woman in the lobby that very morning, a mother named Carol Renner who said her daughter's real name wasn't Klein at all. She watched Daniel's face as she spoke, and she braced herself for anger, for disbelief, for the accusation that she was making it all up out of spite over the bracelet. Instead, what crossed his face was something far worse to witness. A slow, sick recognition, like pieces of a puzzle he'd been avoiding were finally locking into place against his will. Say that name again, he said quietly. The man on the phone. Marcus. Daniel closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, his voice had gone flat and controlled in a way that frightened Nadia more than shouting would have. There's a Marcus Bell. He came up in the background check. Some kind of associate listed on an old lease under Vanessa's name, before she supposedly moved here from Connecticut. My lawyer flagged it as probably nothing. A roommate, maybe. The room went very quiet. Somewhere down the hall, they both heard the soft click of the front door opening, and the light, familiar sound of Vanessa's heels against the marble floor. Don't say anything to her yet, Daniel said quickly, his voice barely above a whisper. Not tonight. I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with before I confront her with anything. Can you get me that woman's phone number? Carol, was it? Nadia nodded, already reaching for her own phone, her hands trembling slightly. Whatever was coming next, there was no way to stop it now. The truth had started moving on its own, and all either of them could do was try to keep up with it before it reached Vanessa first. Daniel didn't sleep that night, and by the time Nadia arrived the next morning, she could see it in the hollows under his eyes. He'd called Carol Renner at nearly midnight, sitting alone in his study with the door closed, and what she'd told him had confirmed everything Nadia had pieced together and then some. Vanessa Renner had grown up outside Scranton in a house that had gone into foreclosure when she was 19. She'd left for the city at 20 with almost nothing, cycled through a string of jobs and a string of relationships, and somewhere along the way had met a man named Marcus Bell. Not a friend, not a business partner, but someone Carol referred to, with visible discomfort, as someone her daughter had worked with for years, running a particular kind of scheme. They would find wealthy, recently single men, build a story, and walk away with as much as they could extract before the truth caught up with them. Usually it was smaller sums. Jewelry, cash, a few maxed-out credit cards before the mark got suspicious and it was time to disappear. Daniel, with his real estate holdings and his private equity firm, was by far the biggest target Vanessa had ever set her sights on. And this time, according to what Carol had heard secondhand from a cousin who still spoke to Vanessa occasionally, the plan wasn't a few months of quiet theft. It was the marriage itself. Once the ring was real and the marriage was legal, Vanessa stood to walk away with a settlement that would set her up for the rest of her life, prenup or no prenup, depending on how she played the divorce that would inevitably follow within a year or two. Marcus's cut, apparently, was the money he'd been threatening to extract if she didn't pay him before the wedding. Hush money to keep him from showing up and blowing the whole thing apart before she'd secured her position. She was never trying to steal a bracelet, Daniel said to Nadia the next morning, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. She was trying to make sure that if anyone ever suspected her of anything, it would be you, not her. She's been building a case against you from the very beginning, in case she ever needed a scapegoat. Nadia felt something settle in her chest, cold and clear. It wasn't relief exactly. It was closer to grief. Grief for a good man about to have his entire future upended, and something like anger on Carol Renner's behalf, a mother dying alone while her daughter built a life on lies just a few miles away. Daniel spent that day quietly, methodically, pulling together everything he needed. He called his lawyer and asked him to expedite a deeper background investigation, this time specifically targeting the name Marcus Bell and any financial ties between him and Vanessa. He requested phone records tied to the prepaid number that had called the apartment. He even asked Priya to quietly pull the security footage from the lobby camera the morning Carol Renner had come looking for her daughter, just in case Vanessa tried to claim the woman was a stranger, a stalker, anyone but who she really was. By evening, the picture was complete enough that Daniel could no longer pretend otherwise. The financial investigator he'd hired years ago for due diligence on business deals had, in a matter of hours, uncovered 3 prior instances of Vanessa Renner using different last names in connection with wealthy men in 2 other states. One engagement that had ended abruptly with a man filing a police report over missing funds that were never recovered, and one marriage that had lasted 11 months before a divorce settlement quietly changed hands. Nadia watched Daniel absorb it all from the doorway of his study, and for the first time since she'd started working there, she saw something in his face that looked almost like fear. Not of Vanessa, but of how close he'd come to marrying her without ever knowing any of it. "I want to confront her tonight," he said. "But I need it done right. If she thinks I have nothing solid, she'll just cry and deny it and manipulate her way out of it, the way she did with the bracelet. I need her to know there's nowhere left to go." He asked Nadia to stay late that evening, a request he made carefully, almost apologetically, aware of everything he was asking of her after everything Vanessa had already put her through. "You don't have to be here for this," he said. "I'd understand if you wanted to go home. But if you're willing, I think it would help to have someone in the room who already knows the whole story, because she's going to try to twist this, and I need a witness she can't discredit." Nadia thought of Maya waiting at her sister's apartment, and she thought of the 2 years she'd spent in this penthouse being quietly invisible to almost everyone who walked through it except the one man now asking for her help. She thought about Carol Renner's face in the lobby, hopeful and heartbroken all at once. "I'll stay," she said. Vanessa came home at 7:30, cheerful and bright, chattering about a floral arrangement she'd finally approved for the reception, completely unaware that the ground beneath her had already given way. She noticed Nadia standing near the kitchen island rather than having left for the day, and something flickered across her face. A small, sharp recalculation quickly smoothed over. "You're still here," Vanessa said lightly. "Long day." "Sit down, Vanessa," Daniel said quietly from the doorway of the living room, and something in his voice made her stop moving entirely. What's going on? Her eyes flicked between Daniel and Nadia, and for just a moment, Nadia saw something raw and calculating pass behind them before the pleasant mask slid back into place. Daniel, you're scaring me. I spoke to your mother last night, Daniel said. Carol. From outside Scranton. The silence that followed lasted only a few seconds, but it felt endless. Vanessa's face didn't crumble the way Nadia had expected. Instead, it went very still, very careful, the expression of someone doing rapid math on how much damage control was still possible. I don't know what she told you, Vanessa said slowly, but my mother has never been well. She says things you can't trust. I also spoke to my investigator, Daniel cut in. His voice steady even though Nadia could hear the tremor of restrained fury underneath it. About Marcus Bell. About New Jersey. About Ohio. He watched her face carefully as he listed the states, and whatever was left of her composure finally cracked at the second name. Vanessa's mouth opened, closed, and for the first time since Nadia had known her, she had absolutely nothing to say. The silence in the living room stretched long enough that Nadia could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen behind her, the distant sound of traffic 40 floors below. Vanessa stood frozen near the entryway, still in her coat, her carefully composed face finally, completely undone. It wasn't supposed to be like this, she said finally, and her voice had changed. The polished, elegant tone gone, replaced by something rougher, more tired, more real than anything Nadia had ever heard from her. I didn't plan to fall, she stopped herself. Don't, Daniel said quietly. Don't tell me you fell in love with me in the middle of planning how much you could take when it ended. I don't think I could stand to hear that right now, whether it's true or not. Vanessa's eyes filled, and this time Nadia couldn't tell if the tears were real or one final performance. Maybe even Vanessa herself couldn't tell anymore. Marcus and I started doing this years ago because I didn't have anything, she said. No money, no family who wanted me, nothing. It was supposed to be a way to survive. And then it just didn't stop. I told myself I'd do it one more time and then I'd be done. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing careful makeup across her cheek. I was going to pay him off after the wedding and just disappear from that life. I was going to be a different person. A wife. I know how that sounds. It sounds like you were going to steal a life you never intended to actually live, Daniel said. With me in it, believing every single word. He didn't raise his voice. That, Nadia realized, was somehow worse than shouting would have been. The quiet, exhausted clarity of a man who had loved someone and was now simply done. I want you out of this apartment tonight, Daniel continued. My lawyer will be in touch about the legal situation, and given what my investigator found in New Jersey and Ohio, I'd strongly suggest you get one of your own. I don't know yet whether I'm going to press charges. I need some time to think about that. But the wedding is over. We're over. And you are never going to speak to Nadia again, in any tone, for any reason, as long as you live. Vanessa's eyes cut to Nadia then, and for one final moment, something ugly and cold passed across her face. The last flicker of the woman who had planted a bracelet in an innocent woman's apron without a second thought. But it faded fast, chased away by the much larger reality closing in around her, and she said nothing at all. She turned, walked to the bedroom to gather what she could carry that night, and left the apartment 40 minutes later without another word to either of them, her heels echoing down the hallway one final time. Daniel stood in the silence afterward for a long moment, staring at nothing. Then he turned to Nadia, and something in his expression made her chest ache. Gratitude, exhaustion, and something like shame all tangled together. I almost married her, he said quietly. If you hadn't said anything, you would have found out eventually, Nadia said gently. I just wish it hadn't taken this long. I owe you more than an apology for the bracelet, Daniel said. You could have stayed quiet. It would have been so much easier for you to stay quiet. I need you to know I understand that, and I'm not going to forget it. Nadia didn't know what to say to that, so she simply nodded, feeling the weight of the last several weeks finally begin to lift from her shoulders. In the days that followed, Daniel made things right in the ways that mattered. He gave Nadia a formal written apology for the accusation over the bracelet, along with a raise that made clear exactly how much her honesty and her loyalty meant to him. He also, quietly without ever making a show of it, arranged for a private nurse to visit Carol Renner twice a week, covering the cost himself, and made sure Carol finally got the chance to see her daughter one more time, under far more painful circumstances than either of them would have chosen, before it was too late. Vanessa never returned to the apartment. 2 months later, Daniel's lawyer confirmed that the New Jersey case had been reopened, and that a warrant was likely once investigators finished tracing the money. Whatever happened to her next, it happened far away from the 40th floor, and far away from Nadia's daily life. On a quiet evening a few weeks after it all ended, Daniel found Nadia in the kitchen finishing up before heading home, and he asked, almost hesitantly, whether she'd ever consider staying on in a different role, someone he could actually trust to run his household and, if she was willing, help him rebuild some sense of normal life after everything that had happened. It wasn't charity. It was recognition, plain and overdue, of exactly who had been paying attention the whole time everyone else had been fooled. Nadia walked home that night the way she always did, past the same streets, toward the same apartment where her sister was waiting with Maya asleep on the couch. Nothing about her life had changed in any dramatic, visible way. But something inside her felt different, steadier somehow, like she'd finally been seen for exactly who she was, not despite the uniform she wore, but in spite of everyone who'd assumed that uniform meant she had nothing worth listening to. She still believed, the same as she always had, that dignity wasn't something anyone could hand you or take away. But it felt good for once to have it recognized out loud. If you were in Nadia's position, would you have stayed silent to protect your job, or told the truth no matter the risk? Let us know in the comments. And if this story moved you, subscribe because there's another one waiting for you next.